here's the story as it happened last year. And I think I may have talked about it, but I don't remember if I did. So I'll cover it one more time. So let me take you back to early 2023. You are in Vermont. It is cold. And the girls basketball athletes, the girls who play girls basketball, they are in the midst of their playoffs. And there is a school called Mid Vermont Christian School. They are the number 12 seed to play against some other high school, some public school that is ranked number 5. And this is in a Division 4 bracket to win the girls basketball state championship. And let me back up for a second. The way these things work at a lot of states is you have one organization, a nonprofit, that usually organizes like March Madness at the high school level, right? They organize football playoffs, basketball playoffs, along with like the state chess tournament. They run all this stuff. And when it comes to basketball, they might separate the biggest schools in the state from the smaller schools because the bigger schools tend to have a lot more, they're a lot better. And so you separate them into different divisions, and then you play a regular season, you seed the teams on the bracket, and then you let them go at it. And sometimes, because there are private schools or Christian schools that want access to that competition, they might go to that group overseeing the competition and say, we would like to join in because we don't have access to that sort of competition. And the state may say, we're okay with that as long as you follow our rules, which seems fair to me. I'm from Illinois. That is how our state does it. And so that's fine. That's what Vermont did. That's why you were seeing a playoff game between a private Christian school and a public school. Except, guess what happened? When that game was scheduled, the Christian school found out that there was a trans player on the public school's basketball team. And now, if you're the Christian school, what do? Right? And this is what they said in a newspaper article shortly after that. The school, per the decision of the board, offered no comment except a statement by email from head of school Vicky Fogg. We withdrew from the tournament because we believe playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardizes the fairness of the game and the safety of our players. Allowing biological males to participate in women's sports sets a bad precedent for the future of women's sports in general. Okay, so they forfeited the game. Okay, why? Because there was a trans athlete on the other team, and then they misgendered this girl. Listen, they never said in that statement how it would impact the safety of their players. She didn't say how the game would be unfair. Like so many right-wing bigots, along with, atheists who have become very horrible people. She basically used buzzwords so she wouldn't have to go into details. Research has shown that there is no consistent evidence that trans people have a competitive advantage in women's sports. All right. And more importantly, this is high school. It's not even like a basketball powerhouse. This is friggin' Vermont high school Division 4 girls basketball. Like, it was meant to be fun. It's intended to celebrate the journey more than the outcomes. And so, for all the supposed concerns about the threat to women's sports, by forfeiting a playoff game, this Christian school denied all of their girls a chance to display their skills on the court and denied the other team an opportunity to play as well, at least for one game. And by the way, for all this talk about like, well, the other team had a competitive advantage, let me show you the bracket. Okay? Here's the bracket of that tournament. Okay, let me go down here to the bottom left. You could see Long Trail versus Mid Vermont Christian, 5th seed against the number 12 seed. The final score was 1-0. Why? Because they forfeited the game. So they just said, all right, we'll give Long Trail 1 point, and that's a win. But look at what happened in the next game when they played. Long Trail, the team that had a trans athlete on it, got demolished. Nearly twice as many points from the other team. So that was the end of their playoff run anyway. So, like, I'm just saying, this team that had a trans player, it's not like they were undefeated all season. I think they had a 14-6 record going into the playoffs. So, like, give it a rest that this team is like, oh no, they're unfairly competitive or whatever. So, Here's where it gets interesting, because after this Christian team forfeited the game, and right now you're thinking, all right, the Christian school lady who runs the school, she's a bigot, but whatever. They forfeited the game. Who cares? They're out of the tournament. That's what they deserve. They chose that path. Here's where it gets interesting. The group that ran the tournament, which is the Vermont Principals Association, like, they couldn't do anything in the moment because the Christian school forfeited the game before anyone really knew what happened. But a couple of days later, when they sat down to assess the situation, they said, well, we have an inclusive policy in our group. And this is what they told the local newspaper. The Vermont Principal Association's policy has been on the books since early 2021 that its prohibition of discrimination includes discrimination based on a student's actual or perceived sex and gender. Basically saying, well, we have a rule that says we don't discriminate against gay, lesbian, trans students. And this school, this Christian school, was violating that rule by forfeiting a game because there was a trans player on the other team. So guess what the Principals Association did? Within like 2 weeks of that game, they kicked Mid Vermont Christian School out of their league. They made it official. They would no longer be allowed to participate. And this is the statement that I absolutely love. This is from, again, March of 2023. Jay Nichols, the executive director of the Vermont Principals Association, said the organization's 15-member executive board was unanimous in its decision. If you don't want to follow VPA rules, that's fine. But then you're just not a VPA member. It's fairly simple. That's really all we're going to say about it, which sounds sensible, right? Like, if you're going to allow a religious school to come into your league, the least they can do is say, all right, we accept your rules when it comes to how you conduct these games. The school broke the rules, so they were kicked out. It's not that complicated, right? So what do you think happened after that? They pretended they were being discriminated against, and they announced plans to appeal that decision. This is what the lady told CNN, or at least she put it in a statement. This is from CNN. Mid Vermont Christian School is disappointed with the decision of the VPA Executive Council to ban us from participation in all VPA activities. We intend to appeal the decision. Canceling our membership is not a solution and does nothing to deal with the very real issue of safety and fairness facing women's sports in our beloved state. We urge the VPA to reconsider its policies and balance the rights of every athlete in the state, except the trans one. We don't care about her rights at all. So they put out that statement. I don't know. Safety and fairness somehow did not bother any other team that played against that particular team with a trans athlete. So the Christians took the coward's way out. And then the school amped up its victim complex by suing state officials over all of this. So last November, the right-wing legal group Alliance Defending Freedom, they filed a lawsuit on behalf of that Christian school and two families, claiming that the state violated the school's First Amendment rights by preventing them from practicing their religious beliefs about sexuality and gender. And this is from Alliance Defending Freedom here. Despite 28 years of prior participation in the league, the school cannot compete in any VPA athletics, effectively blacklisting the school from all state-sponsored events in the state, including VPA spring sports, for which schools are still creating schedules. The VPA is going so far as to exclude Mid Vermont Christian and its students from participating in co-ed academic competitions like the Geography Bee, Science and Math Fair, and Debate and Forensics League, all because the school believes biological differences between boys and girls matter. Buddy, that's how it works. When one organization oversees extracurricular athletic competitions, if you're out of the group, if you're out of the league, you don't get to do any of it. You don't have a right to be in the league. They allowed you to be in the league. And this group said, no, we like bigotry more. Like, whatever, that's how it works. Like, they can always form their own Christian bigot league. They can always organize events with other bigoted churches, and they can hold up banners that say, we hate trans people. Like, they demanded entry into the public league, and now they don't want to play by the public league's rules. Like, the Christian school chose this route, not the state. The state was already being generous, I think, by allowing them to participate. And so this was a 71-page lawsuit. They cited the Vermont case I mentioned in an earlier story, Carson v. Macon, that said if a state offers certain benefits to public schools, they cannot deny those benefits to private schools. But the lawsuit also didn't mention that Maine lawmakers passed a law that said taxpayer dollars can't be used for discrimination, and how that school said they would rather reject the benefits than follow the rules. So in Vermont, the Christian school said they want access to the state benefits without following the state's rules. Like, those are not identical situations. Anyway, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, which is to say the lawsuit went after state education officials as well as the people running the athletic competitions. They made it sound like they were really being discriminated against. Here is part of their lawsuit. The state has thus put plaintiffs to an impossible Hobson's choice, where you think you have two options, but you really only have one. One, abandon their religious beliefs, character, and practices and adopt and follow the state's gender identity rules so they can participate in school athletics and the town tuitioning program. Or two, adhere to their religious beliefs, character, and practices, miss out on middle school and high school sports, lose valuable tuition reimbursements, and inevitably lose students necessary to keep its doors open. Like, no, you don't really only have one choice here. You can do either one. If your private school cannot function because no one wants to go there because you suck, that's your problem. That's a you problem. That's not anybody else's problem, right? Like, there's no reason to allow them to have their cake and eat it too. At no point should anyone have felt bad for them. If the school did not want to compete for transphobic reasons, that is their call, but they don't deserve to be rewarded for it by having access to good competition and an established league. And by the way, they don't deserve tuition dollars if they discriminate against LGBTQ students either. Like, no one was ever punishing them for being Christian. They were punished for refusing to adhere to non-discrimination rules that basically boil down to don't be a dick. And guess what? That is how a judge saw it too. He tossed out the lawsuit this past June. He dismissed the request for a preliminary injunction, basically saying Vermont officials are not targeting Christianity. They applied their rules fairly across the board. They were not singling out Christians in any way. If the Christian school wanted to forfeit games against teams with a trans athlete, the league has every right to kick them out. And the reason I bring all this up today is because I saw this headline recently. Check this out. After that judge tossed out the lawsuit, a Christian school appeals its ban on competing after it objected to a trans player. This is from September 5th, 2024. Mid Vermont Christian School is now appealing this decision as well. All right. So they filed a brief with the Second Court of Appeals, and they're basically saying that their expulsion amounts to religious discrimination. They said that the league allows other teams to forfeit games without penalty. And then they cited, you know what example they cited? They said during COVID, when people were starting to reemerge and have games again, there were teams that had a student who had an exemption to wearing a mask for whatever religious reasons, medical reasons. And there were teams that said, we do not feel comfortable playing against a team that has a student who is not wearing a mask. I mean, this is basketball. People are sweating and breathing right next to each other. And the league allowed it. And there's this Christian school saying, you allowed those people to forfeit and they didn't get punished for it. Why are we allowed to? Well, how come we can't forfeit without getting punished? And of course, you can understand why these things are not analogous. They quit because it was a health hazard for their players in the past, not because, oh, we don't like that kid because he's doing something we don't like. It's not religious discrimination. It doesn't violate the anti-discrimination law to say, we're afraid of getting COVID and this is a health hazard, so we're not going to play the game. It's not the same thing. But look at how they put it in a very fancy way in their appeal, that the VPA has only applied its newfound forfeiting a game justifies expulsion policy to religious schools that cannot compete against males who identify as female is reason to suspect that the object of the VPA's enforcement is to target those beliefs and to exclude those who maintain them. They're saying, oh, your new rules only go after people like us. And Vermont's like, no, our rules go against bigots. And the Christians are like, that's what we said. It's like, do you understand that's a cell phone? Again, look, I don't know how this lawsuit's going to end. I don't know whether an appellate court is going to is going to agree with these arguments. But the argument that Mid Vermont would be eligible to participate in this league if they were not Christian, that is bullshit. They were never kicked out for being Christian. They were kicked out for being discrimination. And the law is already clear that that is unacceptable. And I think it's important to point out that lost in the shuffle here are all the athletes and all the actors and the speech kids and the other chess players and mathletes and everybody at that Christian school who are now deprived of the opportunity to showcase their skills and earn possible scholarships. Why? Because the people running their school decided to prioritize hate over competition. Like, these administrators do not care about the children. They took their Christian hatred out on an athlete on another team because she didn't fit into their rigid gender molds. Like, no one should be shocked that their selfish actions now affect their own students. Like, the school chose this path. They should accept the consequences for it. I hope the appellate court tosses this lawsuit as well, because the school deserves to not have access to that league. It's as simple as that. All right, I'm going to stop there with this story. What other questions we have here? Oh, thank you for that donation. Funny how quiet some folks are about women's sport when there's no controversy. Yeah. My favorite thing about all those people who rail against trans athletes is they always say they're doing it in the name of women's sports. They don't know the first thing about women's sports. Like, quick, name 5 WNBA teams. Who are the high scorers? Who's going to win the championship this year? Like, they don't know. They don't care. They made fun of the U.S. women's national soccer team when they were like losing games because Megan Rapinoe is an outspoken liberal. Like, these people do not care about women's sports, period. But they love saying that, oh, well, trans athletes ruin women's sports, which is a thing we totally love. No, I don't get it. Thanks, Lady Merlin. I just saw about HR 736, and that is concerning as the author of the bill uses Christian nationalist rhetoric to support the bill. I will be honest, I don't know which resolution you are referring to with that, but I'm not surprised that someone's using Christian nationalist rhetoric. So get back to me with the specific. I want to know which bill that is. Hey, congrats on being a YouTube member. I appreciate that. You all can become members by clicking somewhere down here, I am told. I feel bad for the kids who can't participate because of stupid adults. I agree. Competition is so important and it's fun and it's how you make so many awesome connections. And honestly, for most students, that's the way they get to pursue their passions because they're not nearly as excited about like history class. But if you tell them you get to compete in whatever it is, athletic, non-athletic, those kids really come out of their shells. It's great. So yeah, I feel really bad for them, but whatever. Their parents chose to send them to a bad school. What do you expect? You have a right to discriminate, but not be discriminated against. Yeah, no, not how it works. I know, right? They can discriminate all they want, but they don't get to pretend like there are no consequences for that in the public school system. I'm going to jump to this one. I'll come back to that. HR 736 is the out trans kids to their parents bill. Yikes. That's always scary. I mean, I know this is not an original thought, but I've heard this from some right-wing parents. Like, why would my kid like go by a different name at school? And why would the school be okay with that? I, as a parent, should know. Like, buddy, if your kid is not telling you that they are trans or they want to go by a different name or whatever is going on, maybe there's a reason for that. It's you. You're the problem. So it doesn't surprise me that a bill that would force schools to out trans kids to their parents would be written by a Christian nationalist. What was that other question? How much you want to bet that the school is running fundraisers and begging for money from the students' families to pay for their law team? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure they are running fundraisers saying we're victims. You got to give us money, give us tuition dollars.